In the company of Britain's most compelling commentator, the star of Reasoned UK, a very popular political channel on YouTube, it's Darren Grimes. Hi, Darren.
Hi, Mark.
Let's talk about politics in sport. We had the wonderful spectacle of the FA Cup final, which is a truly iconic day in English sport, but marred by politics at both the beginning of the game and the end.
Yeah, exactly. So at the beginning of the game, we had, as everyone listening to this will know by now, we had the taking of the knee, that getting down on bended knee, and fans at Wembley for that FA Cup were booing basically Chelsea and Leicester City players as they took the knee moments before kickoff. And then after the match, to sort of make matters worse, two Leicester players, I guess, hungry for the likes on Twitter, and presumably not, Mark, a tacit endorsement of Israel's terrorist enemy Hamas, two players unwound a Palestinian flag. And then today, Mark, this got me onto the thinking about the sort of politicization of many of our most cherished cultural institutions, and indeed institutions of the state. Because I don't know if you saw this clip of what's reported to be a Metropolitan Police officer chatting and hugging a member of a pro-Palestinian protest. And now, I've got no issue with them hugging some individual that I assume this person knows. But I do take great exception to the political statement uttered in the clip where, you know, they're saying free Palestine as a police officer taking a political stance. And I think many people watching these things, whether it be football, you know, our national sport, or whether it be members of the British police at a time when people feel really quite unsafe, at a time when knife crime is spiking, at a time when burglaries and robberies are going without challenge, I guess, at a time when the police seem more interested in investigating non-crime hate incidents, my good old Orwellian friend, and not actually investigating those really pressing matters for the British public. A lot of people are watching these things and thinking, my God, let's just stop the politics. Let's get the politics out of the way here and actually just, one, get back to kicking the ball around. I quite like it when you do that. I don't like to know what your politics is. And two, get the police back onto the streets and off of our tweets and off of the politics. It's as simple as that. People are fed up, Mark.
Yes, they are. And a lot of people, in fact, thousands of people that listen to this show work very, very hard. They pay for their Sky Sports subscriptions. After the pandemic, they'll be going back to the actual football grounds to support their team. And what they want is entertainment and an escape from their hard-working lives. What they don't need is their finger wagged at and politics.
Exactly. And you're absolutely right. And at a time as well, isn't it, that national sport, you just fancy that bit of escapism of watching your team. As a matter of fact, I mean, I've got to watch Newcastle United, so there's no enjoyment for me, Mark. But you get to watch your team play, and you just want that moment of being that 2 hour, about being able to escape, of being able just completely lost in watching your team. And instead, you're met by not one, but two overtly political statements. And the FA, of course, Mark, has a track record of saying that actually wearing a poppy as a political statement and things like that. And actually, what are the repercussions for taking these stances, which I would certainly argue, I don't want to speak for you, Mark, I would argue is an overtly political statement.
Yes, of
and
course.
One that actually at a time of corona, when people are being propelled into some of the worst financial and mental misery that we've seen in this country for a long time, people just do want to watch the footy without being met by a torrent of political activism. I'm turn on the football to watch Newcastle get thrashed, not to watch NUS-style politics.
Yes, clearly almost everybody shares the sentiment passionately that Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter. But we know that there is an organisation behind that particular movement which wants to defund the police, dismantle capitalism and empty the prisons. And I spoke to one of the greatest black footballers this country has ever seen, John Barnes, played for Watford, Liverpool and England. And he told me on this programme yesterday that taking the knee is an empty gesture, and if he were a player today, he wouldn't do it.
You're hearing that from a few football players, actually, a few black football players who are just saying, and actually I'm not going to take that. I'm not going to do this because this is just tokenism and nakedly so, political virtue signaling. But even if you look at the football point, but the police point as well, what we've seen over, I think, recent times, they've also taken the knee to Black Lives Matter. You know, they've been videoed running from protesters of that movement because it wasn't politically correct to actually enforce the law, driving around in rainbow cars, Mark, dancing in TikTok videos, paying over 70 grand for to hire an assistant director of fairness and belonging. And you just, all of these things, if you were to look at them in isolation, you might think, all right, come on, Darren, have a day off. You've been a right twisty sod. But actually, I'm not, because all of these things, I think, are a sign, one, of the politicization of British sport in general. It's not just isolated to football. We see it in cricket as well. We see it in all sorts of other sports. But the policing as well, where we've got police officers now, Bobby's on the beat, trained at universities, instead of, you know, going through, I guess, the rough and tumble of learning on the job. We've got them coming out of universities and still, I think, being unable to shake off their sort of NUS style politics that they've clearly picked up from universities. Because let's be honest, Mark, universities these days are more like Marxist indoctrination camps than they are learning factories.
Well, they are. They are.
Totally. So I think
students go there now. They borrow enormous amounts of money to study, and they're borrowing money to be told what to think, not being taught how to think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Independently of other people and getting swept up in these sorts of ridiculous left-wing, hard left movements even. So I think we've got a problem across the board. And when people like you and I talk about cancel culture and things like that, and just even saying this sort of thing, were I to be in a job where, I don't know, certainly were I to be high up in policing, were I to say, well, actually, I don't think it's a good use of police time, were I high up in football and I was to say, well, a manager of a club, for example, I could lose my job as well for criticising the politicisation of these things.
Does it? And it's a real worry, isn't it? I mean, you mentioned the march in for support of Palestine this weekend. Do you think it's odd that a lot of people that know nothing about this complex issue have taken to the streets with a Palestinian flag based upon the principle that Palestine is good, Israel is bad?
Yeah, I mean, going on these pro-Palestine, I mean, she almost looked like this officer, and we have I certainly got no evidence that she is actually a police officer. I'm just reporting what actually is reported in that video. And I mean, she certainly has all the gear. So I assume she is a police officer. But if she's not, I apologize profusely to the Metropolitan Police. Don't come for me again. But look, I do actually think it's a problem that a lot of people are just doing this sort of thing, even, you know, posting a black box on Instagram, taking the knee, going out on Black Lives Matter marches, going out on pro-Palestine marches, not looking into what Black Lives Matter, the movement, not the laudable statement, which, as you rightly said, is incredibly laudable, but the movement, which stands for some pretty hard left radical stuff that would fundamentally change and alter what we have done in this country for a very long time, not to mention policing. And then you've got, I just think it's plainly, it is just playing to the gallery. And I think Twitter's got a lot to answer for this, you know, Mark. I really do.
But, because the Arab-Israeli conflict is incredibly complex, Darren, and I've read about this capaciously over the last few days, and I don't know which side to take. The last thing I'm going to do is go on a march and either support Israel or Palestine. It's far more complex than that, and yet thousands flock to the streets because it's the fashionable cause.
Well, it is. And I mean, I think on the other side of the argument, you've got people saying, well, actually, I'm flying this flag because I believe that it's an apartheid state and all the rest of it. And you say, well, hang on a minute. You know, were London being bombarded? Were it our capital city and not Tel Aviv? Would you expect Boris Johnson to sit back and say, well, actually, you know, were it Ireland bombing us, if I just throw a mad one in there? Would the British people expect Boris Johnson to sit back and say, well, actually, we're not going to defend ourselves? It is an incredibly difficult argument, and it's not binary, and it's not sort of easy to answer at all. But that you would assume it was by the sort of torrent of marches and Twitter posts and retweets and all the rest of it.
Well, definitely. Darren Grimes has many thousands of viewers on Reasoned UK, a fantastic news analysis channel on YouTube worth checking out. Darren, thank you so much. We'll do it in a week's time